Guys, let's talk about some takeaways and lessons that we can bring from the COVID-19 pandemic experience into our everyday interactions as cis-hetero guys when it comes to women and non-binary folks, both online and in person. Men, let's talk about learning to respect emotional PPE. Let's go behind the mask. Guess which three-word phrase began a series of questions that I was asked more in 2020, the year of our coronavirus, than ever before. Think about it for a minute. We'll get back to it later. Speaking of the pandemic and the false infodemic spread of misinformation and disinformation, we're all wondering and asking questions about what tomorrow holds for us. As we continue to adapt and change our approach to everyday routines and interactions, some of us are finding life lessons and takeaways on how we can interact with each other differently. One powerful takeaway came from many of us who experienced depression and immobilizing sadness during the course of the pandemic, throughout the ongoing stages of physical distancing and social isolation. People who previously thought that those wrestling with depression just needed an attitude adjustment or a positive mindset now found themselves struggling to get out of bed or taking a whole week to do what used to take just an hour before the pandemic. This opened a window of insight for us to better understand the immobilizing impact of mental health and wellness issues. Throughout all these once-in-a-lifetime generational experiences, there are many potential light bulb moments that my fellow cis-hetero bros can take and embrace and apply to our everyday interactions with people of all genders. Think back to when we cautiously ventured back to that grocery store or the hardware store that we've been to numerous times in our lives for the first time once things opened up back in early 2020. An entirely different experience from the many times we'd ventured in there before, either lost in thought or just focused on the item that we needed to pick up. Many of us developed a heightened sense of awareness of who was a little too near us, who was drifting close, or who was within our 6-foot radius around us. You know, our personal space. Remember that first time someone was standing just a little too close to you? These small moments can help give a little bit of insight into what it's like for people of other genders who walk around day or night, sometimes a little bit more aware or hyper-vigilant of their surroundings and who's around them, because they have to be. I once heard Raven Wings, a trans Afro-Indigenous woman, talk about how leaving her house was a revolutionary act. Think about how we might sometimes feel self-permitted to be in a woman's space or general area, or simply allowed to interact a little bit more intimately with them, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. For example, arms are likely at your side, or around each other's tricep, or resting on shoulders. Posing for a picture with a woman, sometimes men will wrap their hand around a woman's hip or waist and bring her closer intimately into them. You might be thinking, whoa, ease up. I've done that before, but that's not a sexual or romantic thing. I hear you. I've done it before too. I'm more mindful of it now and try to avoid doing it because it's a welcome gesture that you do with someone that you've earned that closeness and permission with, someone you've developed that with, like a personal friend or a romantic partner. My friend Laura describes this as access before intimacy. We will assume closeness and permission before learning to build, grow, and earn the trust that allows for such closeness. Think of it like forcing your own personal bubble on someone else. Think about how we'll place our hand on the small of a woman's back when trying to pass her, like at a crowded bar or nightclub. But if we're passing a guy, we'll just put our hands on his shoulder. Still don't agree? How about from now on when we take pictures with men, we all wrap our hands around their waist and bring them intimately close to each other? Not as likely, huh? Just like we've spent the pandemic learning and developing a heightened sense of awareness, we can also strive to be more mindful of the everyday things that people of other genders have to navigate that people like us, cis-hetero bros, don't really have to navigate, usually because of the impact that we have on them. So, about that series of questions that I mentioned earlier. Deep breath, men. They start with the 3 words, why do men? Why do men abandon responsibilities or emotionally distance when they're overwhelmed or stressed? Why do men react to rejection with verbal and sometimes physical threats? Why do men that I don't know or just met suddenly send a dick pic? Why do men offer agitating opinions that I didn't ask for? Why do men leave extra work for us to take on, like a second shift, on top of our own responsibilities and our own full-time work? Feeling a little distressed from hearing all that? maybe even reaching for the close window button? Keep listening. The way we handle moments like this define us. With something hard to hear, we can get defensive or pull back or check out. Instead, we can sit with it, work on it, and find a way to do better. So stay with me. Let's dig in. Why are questions like this coming up more right now? Spending a lot more time with the people we're isolating with explains some of them. Many of these questions are a result of our work, friendships, or dating interactions happening virtually or online instead of in person. At dinner, at a movie, or sitting together at a concert or a restaurant, or in the lunchroom. Many of our interactions are now condensed to words that we exchange with each other through screens, through video messages, through text messages, through voice chats. Our true nature can surface real quick, and for some of us guys, it doesn't take long for us to say something disappointing, upsetting, or gross out a friend, a coworker, or a potential date. To be fair, as my friend Tessa said, it is quite difficult to engage in most conversations consistently through a screen or a phone. Acknowledging this, of course, doesn't let us off the hook either. Together, we can sit with the ways that we leave others feeling about themselves, about us as men, about the spaces and the places that we interact with each other, and the world around us. Okay, let's look at dick pics for a minute. No, not literally. To be clear, I'm talking about men with dicks who send pictures of their dicks to people that didn't want or express interest in seeing them. It seems like there's been an increased spread in these unwanted pictures, like little JPEG projectile droplets being thrown at people for a variety of reasons. Sometimes we share them because we think that they're wanted. Sometimes it might be a way of being seen. As far as guys who don't have a proficiency in navigating vulnerable moments and lack in developing rapport and connection and social cues. So instead we might shock to stand out. Laura shared with me how many men will say that women have so much power sexually. They will interpret sexual images of women as flexing their power rather than women being sexualized. This reminds me of how some men will consider women wearing makeup or form-fitting outfits in work environments as unfair or working their sexual power, oblivious of how the most sloppily dressed guy can upgrade 5 levels just by putting on a suit. So for many men, Laura says, they perceive themselves to be grounded in their sexuality by aggressively asserting power. Harmful ideas of manhood tell us that our entire soul worth or our self-value is tied to the power that we hold, can demonstrate, prove, or own. The intention of sending a dick pic suddenly out of the blue can be a way to aggressively demonstrate, assert, or seek validation of our own sexual power, like someone showing off their car, their abs, their apartment, their gun. It attempts to say, see, I can clearly take care of you sexually. It's also a symptom of our programming to approach connection or intimacy as transactional. For some guys, though, it's about intentionally provoking just for the thrill of it. This is the guy who, like my friend Molly Cottle says, learned at too young an age that any attention, even negative attention, or any kind of reaction, is better than none. Some people seem to have a mix-up where they have a similar gratification for conflict as they do passion. And a dick pic is a perfect bridge between the two. So before you free willy, when it comes to dick pics, if someone hasn't directly expressed an interest in seeing one, don't share a dick pic. Dealing with some of us as men can be like navigating the degree to which you'll be exposed to a potential virus. Just like how you don't know if someone that you've just met has COVID-19. Someone just getting to know us won't know if we'll potentially expose them to infected, harmful attitudes and behaviors, whether it's in person or online. Our newly adapted approaches to everyday interactions, being vigilant of the encroachment of our own space, being present and alert to avoid potential exposure, and layering ourselves in personal protective equipment can provide insight for adapting a new normal in our character. It's a chance to consider the layers of emotional protection that women and non-binary folks wear as emotional PPE. Some of us men tend to complain about how cold or standoffish people can be when trying to meet them at a bar or we match with them online. Rather than fixating on techniques to persuade someone to lower their defensive layers of protection or devaluing the person for having them up, we can instead be more mindful around why they have these layers up in the first place. Women, for example, might put on the emotional equivalent of a N95 mask, a face mask, a face shield, goggles and gloves, and a full bodysuit just to protect themselves against the potential exposure to harmful attitudes they might come across just by signing on to a dating app. Proceeding with optimism, or just willing to give it one last try, they'll be layered up in emotional PPE. Forget Instagram, just being on LinkedIn means navigating potential DM landmines. trying to determine if men messaging them have hidden intentions when suggesting they meet up for coffee. Talk to women or non-binary folks about what it's like going around anywhere in everyday life. If they're opening to sharing, just listen. Talk to people you know who are dating men about their everyday experiences. Some men will tell women to develop a thicker skin or stop being so sensitive when it comes to being exposed to such harmful behaviors or attitudes, but themselves will go into fight, flight, or freeze mode at the slightest suggestion that men be invited into accountability. These are the symptoms of our infected ideas of manhood that we super spread from generation to generation as men, even when it comes to something as simple as wearing a mask for our collective protection. I think we can all relate to wanting the freedom to do everyday things again. Unchecked freedom, however, doesn't free you from the consequences of your actions. It increases the risk of spread and unwanted exposure to hurt and harm throughout our communities. For instance, some men do not want to wear a mask because if we fear admitting any kind of vulnerability diminishes what we perceive as displayed strength. Some men will not mask up to help protect the people that we know or don't know, nor model wearing masks and practicing physical distancing, which ultimately protects us all in the long run. These men will not wear a mask because the infection that we carry is the belief that being perceived as weak is worse than death itself. Women want freedom, online or in person, to do their thing without worrying about being exposed to harmful, infected attitudes like the kind that actress Milana Weintraub had to deal with. Videos of an AT&T commercials featuring Milana had the comment section bombarded with numerous gross and demeaning comments about her. Perhaps the extreme unwanted attention was partly due to her playing a retail customer service employee, a person at their place of work that might provide the closest to real-life interaction some men will get with a woman they find attractive, and with whom they confuse their polite and attentive service with romantic or sexual interest or desire in them. In response, Milana offered unearned grace when she took to Instagram Live to have conversations with men who help men find antidotes to harmful ways of being a man, like the folks at A Call to Men, inspiring healthier paths towards manhood. Like so many women on the front lines of the pandemic showing leadership, Milani is yet another example of women who are willing to show up at the risk of their own emotional PPE in order to help us dudes and bros overcome infected behaviors and attitudes that not only harm people of other genders, but hurt us as men as well. Think about when you've had to consider who you would let into your pandemic bubble. Who is trustworthy and responsible enough to not expose or put your parent, your partner, children, family, or loved ones at risk? Think about how you can be the kind of person others would allow into their own emotional bubble. Are you someone whose actions and impact help build and earn trust? We want others to let us in. We can instead focus on peeling through our own layers and continuously doing our own inner emotional work within our own bubbles. Want an example of what that can look like? Here's a 2-minute clip of a man being very real. Kier of Kier and Them gives us a refreshingly honest take on how he's wrestling with not having the words to describe what he's navigating.
Can I talk to y'all for a minute? Being a man and trying to learn how to be a good husband and a good father and a good person and still know who you are outside of those roles, it's challenging. I'm learning more about what a man really is because I got this on-the-job training here. Just getting to a point where I'm frustrated because all these things that the world taught me that a man was or a man is supposed to be, that shit is supremely unhelpful right now. I ain't got no answers, man. I'm still figuring it out. You let the world tell you what a man is. A man is the sum of what he does for his woman and his family. The longer I live, I'm beginning to realize that that is entirely not true. A man is so much more internally. A man is what he thinks about himself when nobody's around. A man is how he treats himself when nobody is around. What he does with the guilt that he has, how he manages his relationships, how he manages his rage, how he self-reflects, how or if or when he apologizes. It's a lot, man. I'm starting to realize that men are more complex than the world leads us to be. Realizing I'm more complex, man. I got needs and stuff I never realized. And now the new game isn't identifying my needs. It's actually being comfortable talking about them.
We as men layer up to try to hide from what we're trying to avoid. hard truths, and deep emotional work. Whether you like it or not, people of other genders will sometimes layer up an emotional PPE before an interaction or a conversation with us. So rather than get defensive or strategize on ways to make them tick off their emotional layers and let us in, we can focus on the kind of energy and environment we create around ourselves, within our own bubble, that inspires trust to let us in. Look, I know men are always hearing that we need to get it together, but when it comes to that hard inner work, you don't have to do it alone. Let's get it together. When we focus on carrying ourselves in a way that's mindful, compassionate, and present, it will build the trust and comfort that gives someone the freedom or choice to slowly let us into their bubble and not have to layer up around us. They might need to emotionally leave their face shield up for a while. Don't take it personally. Let's take our responsibility to create a welcoming and infection-free environment around us very personally. People like Milana are willing to show up for us in everyday spaces that are infected with harmful displays of manhood because they ultimately believe in men and our ability to grow and do better. Being a better man is not about being better than everyone else. It's about being better than our yesterdays. They deserve better. We deserve better. So let's slow the spread of hate and build layers of faith and trust in us as men. Right now, that's the kind of community spread that we need. Most of this is from a piece that I wrote for higherunlearning.com called Emotional PPE and Other Takeaways for Guys in a Pandemic. You can find it there, share it along with this video, or whichever one a guy in your life is more likely to watch or read. We're going to have more of these Behind the Masc videos coming out in the weeks and months to come, so keep tuning in to watch and continue to strive to be the lesson in action. And where'd I put that mask?